head of the Pennsylvania department at the Carnegie Library. Our speaker tonight is Ray Duquesne. Over the past few years, Ray has been active locally in film productions, having worked on Sudden Death, Hoffa, Silence of the Lambs, Darrow, and Bob Roberts. A member of Pittsburgh Filmmakers and a board member of Pittsburgh Film Workers Association, Ray is currently absorbed in his efforts to produce a film about the famous B-25 bomber that mysteriously disappeared into the Monongahela River in 1956. Ray is a devoted admirer of Nikola Tesla and an indefatigable promoter of what he believes is Tesla's rightful place in history. Tonight he will be ably assisted in his presentation by Rik Billok, reporter, Neil Graff, ZIGETTI, John Henchar, Tesla, and Jennifer McMahon as Anna Morgan. There will be a brief question and answer session after the presentation. If you brought a camera, please hold your picture taking until after the program. Ray?
One, two. Thank you all for showing up today. The genesis of a genius. One fine day in 1898, the ground in New York's Lower East Side suddenly began to tremble. Buildings shook. Windows shattered, pipes burst, and the residents of Soho, Little Italy, and Chinatown rushed out onto the streets, shouting in panic, many crying mercy from the wrath of the God who presided over poor Sodom and Gomorrah. The police at Mulberry Street Station put aside fear and began a triangulation to determine the earthquake epicenter. It lay precisely at 46 East Houston Street, and two of New York's finest ran straight for it over the unsteady ground. Barely making it up the swaying steps, they burst into a laboratory just in time to witness an elegantly dressed man smashing the remains of a little machine with a sledgehammer. Within seconds of the offending oscillator's demise, the quake slowly subsided. The immaculately clad man bowed to the police.
Gentlemen, I am sorry. You are a trifle too late to witness my experiment. I found it necessary to stop it suddenly and unexpectedly in an unusual way. However, if you will come around this evening, I will have another oscillator attached to this platform, and each of you can stand on it. You will, I am sure, find it a most interesting and pleasurable experience. Now you must leave. I have many things to do. Good day, gentlemen.
Of course, the police responded with a robust, "No way, buddy, the experiment stops now." But this wouldn't be the last time that they would be paying similar visits to the laboratory warehouse of Mr. Nikola Tesla. When reporters arrived, he told them that he would destroy the Brooklyn Bridge in a matter of minutes if he liked. He could walk over to the Empire State Building, he said, and leave it in a tangled wreck in a very short time. The mechanism would be an oscillator, an engine so small that it would require only 2.5 horsepower to fit into your pocket. Pleased with this beginning, he put the oscillator in his pocket and went out to find subjects, often finding abandoned buildings. Once, he located a steel frame skeleton about 10 stories tall in the Wall Street district. Seeing no one around, he clamped the device onto one of the beams, adjusted the frequency to steel, and stood back. Within minutes, the building began to sway and shake. Unfortunately, there were workmen who had been sleeping, hidden from the sight of their foreman and Nikola Tesla, who began abandoning the building, some from the higher floors, sustaining broken limbs from the fall. General panic ensued on the street, and Tesla quickly removed the device and quietly exited the scene before the arriving police. Tesla was developing a new science, the science of telegeodynamics, one of many new sciences that he would originate over his lifetime. Tesla theorized that a battery of gyroscopes mounted in a region of severe earthquake hazard could transmit thrusts or pulses into the earth at equally timed intervals, building up resonance in weak strata and releasing the plate pressure before serious quakes could occur. Today, there is renewed interest by seismologists in such techniques. Nikola Tesla, many called him a genius born ahead of his time. Was he a wizard or alchemist? Was he a super psychic, reincarnated Atlantean or extraterrestrial being, a spiritual master? Was he universally recognized at one point as one of the most brilliant, enigmatic, yet least understood, least recognized scientific geniuses in history? Why is Nikola Tesla unknown to every school child in this country, and in fact to almost all of our people except to some rock band? Why do only a small percentage of electrical engineers recall the name Nikola Tesla? Why is there not a national holiday to this man who developed the fundamentals of radar, missile guidance systems, microwave technology, neon and fluorescent lighting, turbine engines so advanced that they could never be improved upon, alternating current, of course, radio, television, the and/or gates, and other basics for computers in the 1920s, cryogenics, beam weapon systems, and wireless power transmission, to name just a few. Why have mighty powerful forces tried to suppress the amazing story of this genius? There was an organized movement to delete all Tesla data from libraries soon after his death in '43. School libraries were very targeted. At the turn of the century, Tesla, a scientific pioneer, was one of the Gilded Age's superstars. He held more than 1,200 patents. Yet he is one of the most mysterious men who ever lived. Edison gets 5 pages in the New World Encyclopedia. Tesla gets barely 2 paragraphs. This is typical of the media cover-up. His name and the credit due to him have been suppressed in the, quote, interest of national security, unquote. To understand these questions and the answers to them, I must take you back in time, to a time and place very different from our own, devoid of all the products and luxuries that shape and inform our society. For the man who gave us the civilization of ours had not yet been born. Okay, on the stroke of midnight between October 9th and 10th of July 1856, in the small Yugoslavian town of Smiljan, one of the most brilliant and distinguished inventors since the death of Da Vinci was born. The Zhukka Tesla, his mother, was a remarkable woman and most assuredly possessed the spirit of invention. Here was a woman who could neither read nor write, yet moved with ease in cultural circles, and possessed literary abilities far beyond those of a person of similar education. Tesla never wearied of talking about his remarkable mother. She could easily recite without error long passages from the Bible and repeat thousands of verses of the national poetry. It was because of her that Tesla, in his later busy days as an American Superman, still found time to translate and have published the best of Serbian sagas. She was also famed for her artistic ability. She had an excellent grasp of philosophy and a practical understanding of mechanical and technical devices. She needed a loom for her household weaving, so she designed and built one, and in the process improved upon and advanced loom design and efficiency. She was humble and did not consider herself an inventor, but built many labor-saving devices for her household. Nikola's father was the son of an army officer who had fought under Napoleon, and he was the minister of their community. He wrote philosophical essays, poetry, and political articles. He wanted his son to also join the army and later ministry. Nikola instead was constantly engaging in his many childhood inventions. In reviewing his life in later years, he could look back upon these lines of investigation of his boyhood and see how they led directly to some of his major inventions. When Nikola was 5, he designed and installed a water wheel across a mountain brook near his home made of a disc from branches and rocks. The device was a success from the young boy's standpoint. It was crude, but it rotated. It was only to his later surprise that he discovered that water wheels had paddles. His was operating without. He had advanced the science of water wheels. Shades of his later bladeless turbine, but that lay in the future. This was his first practical demonstration of a lesson he would never forget: the utilization of free energy that would carry mankind itself to freedom from the great curse of grueling labor. This was Nikola's magnificent concept that dominated his every thought as an inventor: free energy for a free world. When he was 9, he designed his first motor. It was shaped somewhat like a windmill, but it was powered by June bugs, fastened by glue to their appointed task. No wind was involved. However, a little companion entered the room to witness its operation, and spying the jar of reserve June bugs, grabbed a handful and ate them. Nikola was so sickened by the event that he freed the remaining captives and never utilized bug power again. This was his first direct step toward capturing power from the air without enslavement of man or beast. On another occasion, an experiment with flying almost cost him his life. He reasoned that if he sat on a barn roof with an umbrella and hyperventilated sufficiently, the excess oxygen would lighten him sufficiently so that the wind would carry him when he jumped, and he would float on the breeze. He didn't. His school, on one occasion, arrayed an exhibit of modern water wheels.
I constructed many of these and found great pleasure in operating them. How extraordinary was my life! And an incident may illustrate. My uncle had no use for this kind of pastime, and more than once rebuked me. I was fascinated by a description of Niagara Falls in Canada I had perused and had pictured in my imagination a big wheel run by the falls. I told my uncle that I would go to America and carry out this scheme. 30 years later, I saw my ideas carried out at Niagara and marveled at the unfathomable mystery of my mind. I was once prostrated by simultaneous score of illnesses, and my condition became so desperate I was given up by physicians. One day I was handed a few volumes of new literature, unlike anything I had ever read before, and so captivating as to make me utterly forget my hopeless state. They were the earlier works of Mark Twain, and to them might have been due the miraculous recovery which followed. 25 years later, when I met Mr. Twain and we formed a lifelong friendship between us, I told him of the experience and was amazed to see that great man of laughter burst into tears.
While wandering in the mountains one day, a thunderstorm broke overhead, and Nikola saw first a lightning flash and then saw rain come down in torrents. He reasoned that the lightning had precipitated the downpour. Even while walking through the downpour, he envisioned the day when rain could be produced, where and when needed, thus providing an abundant food supply around the world, from Manhattan to Ethiopia. He never lost the vision. 30 years later, in the mountains of Colorado Springs, he produced bolts of lightning exceeding those of nature. He planned to use such bolts in his weather control device, but was stopped by financial and governmental forces when the U.S. Patent Office refused to go along with his invention. That is, until after his death, but more on that later. As a result of his several bouts with death during childhood illness, he developed the ability to see mental images in solid 3D before him in the air, in the very ether. He found that he could build and design machines etherically before him, testing them, turning them around, making necessary adjustments, then leaving them on file to be instantly recalled later. He did not have to make plans or blueprints because of his power of instant recall. Even after 5 years or so, when he did need the design, he could call it up instantly before him, in the air, complete with exact dimensions. Nikola found that he didn't need to go to the blackboard in classrooms to work out a problem either. At the word blackboard, it appeared to him in the ether before him. As the problem was stated, it appeared instantly before him, together with all the symbols and operations required to work out the solution. Each step appeared, and much more rapidly than anyone could possibly work out on paper or slate. Therefore, by the time the whole problem was stated, Nikola could give the solution immediately. And this came in handy later years before the computer. A lot of physicists at universities would come visit him because he was basically the only computer around. And he enjoyed the company. He used the same power to replace all customary memory functions, and he soon discovered that he could learn foreign languages with little of the usual effort. He became proficient in a dozen languages, and this opened up entire new worlds that was closed to other students. From 1862 to 1874, he attended elementary and lower secondary school at Gospic and high secondary at Karlovac. From 1875 to 1878, he attended the advanced technical school at Graff, which is coincidentally the hometown of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but Tesla didn't know that, so we won't hold it against him. He'll be back. He completed the 4-year course in 3 years. He carried away with him one lasting impression thereafter. His professor of physics had held him enthralled with demonstrations of feats performed with laboratory apparatus. Tesla knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that his life was to be fully and completely dedicated to a study of electricity. A tactic he also seemed to develop was to fall into deathly psychic illnesses when faced with implacable, almost inescapable wrong life path directions. With his life stretching completely before him, he returned home, only to face up to compulsory service in the military and parental demands of a subsequent church career, both of which he abhorred. Again, he coincidentally fell into a deep illness. A cholera epidemic raged in the town, and it was presumed that he had cholera in addition to malaria, plus the nervous strain brought on by his college work, and, last but not least, undernourishment resulting from the unhappy culinary situation at the Graz Technical School. At any rate, whatever his understanding about his son, the Reverend Tesla, Nikola's father, was ready to accept anything to save the life of Nikola, and at that moment when the boy was drifting off into unconsciousness, from which it seemed apparent he would not re-emerge, his father in a clear, firm voice commanded him, "Do not die." In exchange, Nikola, with one sly eye open, used his few remaining gasps to break the news that he would remain if his father agreed to let him become an electrical engineer. The bargain was struck on the instant, and miraculously, within a few seconds, vital energy began pouring through Nikola's tired body, and death was hustled out the back door. In a few days, Nikola was up and about, and life was glorious once more. His destiny was on track. Nikola was to be an electrical engineer, and the military was minus one recruit. Tesla finished his studies at the University of Prague in 1880, where he extended his studies in physics, mathematics, and mechanics. A piece of electrical equipment, a Graff machine, that could be used as either a dynamo or motor, had been acquired by the school. It was a direct current machine and was demonstrated to the class. It did not please Tesla because a great deal of sparking took place at what is called the commutator in order to turn the current around. The professor explained that as long as electricity flowed in one direction, and the sparking could, therefore, not be avoided. Tesla replied that by using alternating current, the commutator could be eliminated. The professor let loose a storm of criticism. He informed Tesla in an abrupt and professional manner that many men had already experimented with alternating current, and it was simply not feasible. But in that instant, Tesla had an intuitive flash. He knew that he could and would demonstrate it. The argument between student and teacher went on for the remainder of the term, and although Tesla was unable to bring his vision immediately down to practical terms, he was by no means discouraged. The professor stated, as with many throughout Tesla's life, only to be proved wrong, that Tesla's theories were contradicted by nature, and that settled the issue. It was far from settled in Tesla's mind. The vision of alternating current remained there before him. In his heart, he knew that he would make the great discovery that would elevate the infant science of electricity to the maturity of a great power. Just after the graduation from the University of Prague, his father died, and Tesla set out to become self-supporting. He landed a job and was placed in charge of the new telephone exchange in Budapest. While there, he developed an amplifier which led to the present amplifiers on radio and TV sets. He never patented the device, which would have made him well off for quite some time. But his sole interest was still the problem of AC, which had not fully crystallized in his mind. He could scarcely think of anything else, so obsessed was he. And he knew that if he stopped working on it, he would die. If he failed in his endeavor, he would perish, for nothing else mattered. It was his life mission, that or nothing. He was a man without choice, and on a late February afternoon in 1882, He had recovered sufficiently to take a walk in a park in Budapest. His companion was a former classmate named ZIGETTI. The two men walked toward the setting sun. The skies were painted with colors of high brilliance. Tesla was reciting aloud the German poet Goethe's poem concerning Faustus and his deal with the devil. It was a cosmic moment, and Tesla was at one with the angels.
The glow retreats. Done is the day of toil. It yonder hastens, new fields of life exploring. Ah, that no wing can lift me from the soil, upon his track to follow, soaring.
Suddenly, Tesla stood looking transfixed into the sun itself.
Mr. Tesla, are you all right? Mr. Tesla.
Don't speak, just watch. See, I can reverse.
Mr. Tesla, are you ill? I don't see anything. Do you think that you can reverse the sun?
Don't you see it? Look, it's right there, here in front of me. See how smoothly it is running. Now I throw the switch and I reverse it. It goes just as smoothly in the opposite direction. No sparking, no loss.
Perhaps you'd better sit down and rest for a while, Mr. Tesla. You've been ill.
It's all right, ZIGETTI. Don't look at me as if I were the village idiot. I'm talking about alternating current motor. I've solved the problem. The answer was there all the time. It's so simple. Just stop talking, listen and watch. It's right here before us. It's the rotating magnetic field that's the answer. How could I have been so blind for so long? Look, it's the rotating magnetic field that drags the armature along with it. That's all. Isn't that ridiculous? All these years, and there it was all the time. So sublimely simple.
I think it's I who needs to sit down now.
ZIGETTI, long ago, I taught myself to visualize objects and formulas so that I can work on them even when they are not actually before me. But I should expect you to see it too. I'll draw it for you here on paper.
I know what you mean by the rotating field, Tesla. I know that it will work. I don't see quite how, but
I'll show you. In all my thinking, I have always used one circuit. That has been my trouble. It's like a steam engine with one cylinder. Using a second circuit is like adding a second cylinder to the steam engine. Don't you see? The two circuits will carry the same frequency alternating current, but the current waves will be out of step, slightly out of phase with each other, just like two pistons. It's so simple.
that is obvious. But I don't see.
You see, the one piston stows, for instance, on the center, both at the top and bottom of the stroke. I add a second cylinder. The pistons in the two cylinders are connected to the shaft, so that their cranks are at an angle to each other. Now, do you see what happens? The two pistons reach the top and bottom of the stroke at different times. One is dead center, the other is turning the engine with a power thrust.
I see! Of course!
I shall produce a field of force that rotates at high speed. It will surround and embrace an armature which will require no electrical connections. The rotating field will transfer its power without wires through space, feeding the energy by means of its lines of force to closed-circuit coils on an armature, enabling it to build up its own magnetic force field that locks it into the rotating magnetic whirlwind produced by the field coils. No wires, no faulty connections, no commutator. All the experts are wrong. The professors are wrong. I have overcome the laws of nature.
Shortly thereafter, Tesla was recommended for a job in Paris, and he was pleased to go to that city because it meant working for the Continental Edison Company and many contacts with Americans who were interested in all sorts of mechanical developments. Meanwhile, he had built mentally a complete alternating current system, both two-phase and three or more. His famous polyphase power system was a reality. As usual, he designed the transformers, dynamos, motors, and all other devices in the ether before his eyes on his etheric blackboard. He could test these mental constructs by leaving the machines running for weeks in his mind's eyes. He would then occasionally examine them for signs of wear. When he arrived in Paris, he formulated a certain living pattern to which he would adhere the rest of his life. He was always dressed immaculately, full of self-confidence, and carried himself with poised, quiet attitude. For many years, he never rested more than 5 hours at night, never sleeping more than 2 out of the 5. Tesla's life in Paris went on smoothly, but there was no interest in his world-changing discovery. So focused were people on the new, but yet already obsolete direct current, in his mind. He was employed by Continental Edison, working all day on direct current machines, and this proved to be irksome. Finally, the situation was changed abruptly by an accident at the railway station in Strasbourg, where an Edison powerhouse and electric lights had been installed. Tesla was sent to survey the damage and proceed with repairs. Once the work got underway and he became supervisor, he seized the opportunity by the forelock and arranged for a little space and tools in a nearby machine shop a little bit on the side. And there he, while working on the Edison plant, proceeded to transfer his AC motor from mind to matter. He was an amateur machinist, but a meticulous worker. Tesla not only made each part exact to the thousandth of an inch, working from mental picture, not from blueprint, but he also did not have to test the parts because he knew they already fit. When he had finished the entire collection, he quickly assembled the machine and started up his own power generator. The cosmic moment had struck. He closed the switch. The armature turned and built up speed. He closed the reversing switch. The armature stood still. Then instantly turned in the opposite direction. No sparking, no vibrating. Alternating current had been transferred from the invisible to the visible, from the impossible to reality, and from a substance lighter than gas to metal. So there in the noisy machine shop in Strasbourg stood the very motor which Tesla had first discovered in the sunset glow of the park in Budapest. The humble machine that would change life on the planet forever sat mutely before him. Tesla returned to Paris from his successful repairs in Strasbourg to collect the large sum of money promised him by Con Edison, and encountered a situation he was to repeat later in America. The company claimed not to remember this agreement, and that the only solution was for Tesla to speak directly with Mr. Edison himself. This meant going to America. Mr. Batchelor, who was his supervisor at the time, provided him a letter of introduction to Thomas Alva Edison, which stated, "I know of only 2 great gentlemen. You are one. This young man is the other." Tesla set out for New York in the summer of 1884. He had a bag full of clothes, his AC motor, his wallet, and a pocket full of poems. In the rush of confusion at the station, he found himself robbed of everything but 4 cents and his poems. In this state, he set sail and arrived at New York City in the Promised Land. He lacked fare for a cab or trolley, so he set out to walk from the pier to the home of a friend. He walked past an electrical repair shop and inside saw a weary and frustrated workman struggling with a recalcitrant DC motor. Tesla entered the shop and offered to help. Although the task was difficult, he finally had the machine working. The grateful mechanic handed the destitute Tesla $20 and offered him a job. Tesla politely refused, mentioning to the surprised workman his employment with the great Edison. The next day, the 2 behemoths met, and it was not auspicious. Edison belonged to the direct current school of thought, and Tesla had not only invented a device in opposition to DC, he had made it obsolete. Edison was lacking in technical education. He was also totally unable to understand Tesla's ability to visualize a problem in its entirety without doing any work on it or following the Edisonian trial and error method. Years later, reporters would ask Tesla what he thought of the Edisonian maxim of, quote, "Invention is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration." Tesla sniffed. With a little more theory, he could save himself all that perspiration. Edison was strictly a commercial money-making man. He was untrained in the science of electrical engineering and therefore had to depend upon those whose services he could get for hire. He was hog-tied to the value of the dollar and was therefore forced into the role of huckster. He also could never shake himself free from the clutches of the monkey on his back in the form of the J.P. Morgan interests, although there is no evidence to show that he ever desired to do so. Some men are destined to play the organ grinder. It does not lie within the pattern of all men to compose great music. Yet Edison was conscious of Tesla's great value, and while he could not afford to let it be known that he had not hired him, he rather grudgingly hired Tesla. And almost at once, Edison was placed in a position from which only the incomparable Tesla could rescue him. The finest passenger ship of the day, the Oregon, had been installed with Edison's troublesome electric light plants, which had just failed completely, and the vessel was ready to set sail. Edison could not solve the problem, so Tesla said he could do it. He went to the ship late in the afternoon and had the dynamos functioning perfectly the following morning.
At 5 the next morning, I met Edison with Bachelor and a few other friends as they were returning home to retire. "Here is our Parisian running around at night," he scoffed. When I told him that I was coming from the Oregon and had repaired both machines, he looked at me in silence and walked away without another word. But when he had gone a distance, I heard him remark, "Bachelor, this is a damn good man." One evening in the winter of 1885, Mr. Edison, Mr. Bachelor, myself, and others entered where the offices of the company were located. Someone suggested guessing weight. Edison felt me all over and said, "Tesla weighs 152 pounds to the ounce." And he guessed it exactly. I whispered to Mr. Johnson, "How is it possible that Edison guessed my weight so closely?" "Well," he whispered, "you must not say anything." But Edison was employed for a long time in a Chicago slaughterhouse where he weighed thousands of hogs every day. That's why.
No, Edison isn't back there. The Oregon incident served to advance his prestige with Edison. When he later approached Edison with a plan to improve the design of the Edison dynamos and also lower their operating costs, Edison not only agreed, but offered Tesla $50,000 if the work came up to expectations. Tesla labored for months, putting in daily overtime. He completed designs for 24 types of dynamos. Patents were taken out by Edison. Nikola requested his $50,000. Edison claimed that the agreement had been merely a joke, something only Americans would get, and foreigners like him just wouldn't understand, wherein Tesla resigned. The Strasbourg incident had been repeated. It was the year 1885. Had Tesla known the heartaches that lay ahead, he might not have had the courage to continue his efforts to provide alternating current for a world that seemed to offer him nothing but scorn. At this time, a group of promoters offered to finance a small company to promote Tesla. They were to pay him a small salary and were to reward him on a grand scale with stock in the company. He jumped at the opportunity to develop AC. But once the company was formed, Tesla had to develop an arc lamp for street and factory illumination. The light was developed and Tesla took out patents on his design. However, the company had been formed in such a tricky way that when Tesla was awarded stock, he found it to be worthless. The promoters prospered and Tesla was destitute. Tesla had struck bottom, and by 1887, he was forced to actually dig ditches at $2 a day. Fortune smiled again, however, as a foreman recognized the genius Tesla and introduced him to several investors in the Western Union Telegraph Company. The men put up sufficient funds to finance the Tesla Electric Company. It opened in April 1887, and Tesla found himself a neighbor of Edison. It is impossible, even today, to evaluate the virgin field of electrical science, which Tesla explored within a few months after his new laboratory opened. The U.S. Patent Office could not easily grasp the scope of his work. They considered his invention so original and so basic that they simply started issuing a succession of patents that brought the new age of power to birth in one mighty surge of advancement. The entire electrical world of 1887 was engulfed by the sweeping new advance. It can now be seen in retrospect that in the 110 years which have since elapsed, civilization has not yet absorbed even the basic fundamental scientific achievements produced by Tesla in that time period. In April of 1888, he applied for 5 more patents, which were granted. Toward the end of 1888, he was issued 18 additional patents. By this time, the entire scientific world was not only amazed, but completely baffled by the sudden manner in which their cherished concepts were swept away overnight. I must interject here and state my strong opinion that the revolutionary discovery by Pons and Fleischmann of cold fusion back in 1988 will soon produce the same effect on our current civilization if it's allowed to get out from under some current oppression. The oil age is dead and fossil fuels are history, basically. The social groups of the social gossips of the day in 1888 also had their word to say about Tesla. To them, he was at once the most fascinating and the most aggravating of men. He did not share the interests, and they could not seem to find a way of sharing his. It was incomprehensible to them that a man of such cosmopolitan taste could overlook them so utterly, so completely. So far as women were concerned, Tesla was considered to be the world's most eligible bachelor. Ambitious mothers and anxious daughters were close, or at least let us say, they tried. But no one ever got close to Tesla. He lived in solitary splendor. The divine actress, Sarah Bernhardt, dropped her kerchief before him. He returned it, and immediately returned to an animated discussion on electricity. And then, there was Anna Morgan.
My name is Anna Morgan. Many of you may know me as an accomplished poet and teacher of poetry to children. Perhaps you may even have read one of my many books on this subject. I'm also known as the daughter of the financier J.P. Morgan. Much has been said of him, both good and ill, but as a young debutante moving among the circles of the privileged, I was not much touched by any of this. There was one thing, however, that did manage to touch me, was my father's association with Mr. Nikola Tesla. Nikola was at the height of his fame as an inventor, and my father had joined with him on one of his enterprises. It was during this time that I fell in love with him. He was tall, he was dark, he was dashing and handsome. Nikola could charm a lady completely off her feet and leave her devastated with those mesmerizing, penetrating deep blue eyes of his. Yet it seemed that no woman could touch his heart. One night I was introduced to Nikola at a society party.
It is my pleasure, madam.
Sir, the pleasure is all mine. I've heard so much good about you, and I must admit that I'm excited of the news that you'll soon be lighting the whole of New York. Is it true that my father's house is the first to be lit? Mr. Tesla? I thought it was me. It wasn't until much later that I discovered the true culprit. Pearl earrings. Nikola had a terrible intolerance for pearl earrings. I would not part with them. Do you know, he demanded exactly 18 napkins on his table at every setting. If the contents of his plate were not divisible by 3, he could not eat. My love turned to bitterness when I read the interview wherein he claimed invention his only mistress. But how can I hate a man who lights every city on the planet, who has created such wonders, and has given his entire self to our greater happiness and comfort? No, the enemies he has are powerful enough, for they are the enemies of mankind, will soon drive him into poverty and anonymity. Therefore, I choose not to join those against him, but rather to remain in anonymity as well, as an ally. I will always love him.
Morgan herself never married after that.
Of course, Mr. Tesla may be quite vulnerable to Cupid's efforts and shafts, but somehow or other we doubt it. We are great admirers of him and his work, and we give him credit for good, hard sense. We have faith enough in women to believe that his fate will come, and that someone will be found who is not only a match for his intensity in all respects, but who will tax his inventive genius to the utmost. For example, in trying to explain where he was at 2 o'clock some night, whatever may be the cause of the abnormal condition in which this distinguished scientist finds himself, we hope that it will soon be removed. For we are certain that science in general, and Mr. Tesla in particular, will be all the richer when he gets married. Electrical Review Magazine, August 14, 1896.
I do not think there is any thrill that can go through the human heart like that felt by the inventor as he sees some creation of the brain unfolding to success. Such emotions make a man forget food, sleep, friends, love, everything.
Do you believe in marriage for persons of artistic intent?
For an artist, yes. For a musician, yes. For a writer, yes. For an inventor, no. The first three must gain inspiration from a woman's influence and be led by their love to final achievement. But an inventor has so intense a nature with so much in it of wild, passionate quality that in giving himself to a woman he might love, he would give everything, and so take everything from his chosen field. I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men.
The next momentous Tesla development came on 16 May 1888 when, in response to an invitation, he gave a lecture and demonstration before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers. This lecture served notice upon the entire world that the greatest genius of the age had brought forth his discoveries to fruition, presenting civilization with AC, and thus setting electricity geographically free. Under Edison's direct current system, it was necessary to have a powerhouse belching in the center of every square mile, or every few blocks in large cities, polluting the planetary landscape. This presented an impossible situation if electricity was to become a planetary source of power as Tesla visualized.
In the presence of an enthusiastic gathering of the foremost electrical talent of the country, a modest young Serb, Nikola Tesla, by name, delivered a lecture on his discoveries of results with alternating currents of high frequency. At one bound, he placed himself abreast of such men as Edison, Brush, and Alexander Graham Bell. Those inventions are in themselves fundamental and far-reaching, but now Mr. Tesla has utterly eclipsed them by his experiments for obtaining the electric light electrostatically. On the occasion of this memorable lecture, Mr. Tesla held his audience in complete captivity of attention and admiration for over 3 hours. And since that time, the mere report of the nature of his experiments has aroused the intensest curiosity across Europe. Mr. Tesla was not satisfied with these results, brilliant as they were. He had set himself no less the task than to create a lamp which, without any external connection to wires or conductors of any sort, should glow brightly when placed anywhere in an apartment. It is rightly so that Mr. Tesla is called the Electrical Columbus. Electrical Review, June 16, 1888.
When Tesla gave his famous lecture, 16 May 1888, George Westinghouse was in the audience. Westinghouse was already well known as the inventor of an air brake for trains and of many other electrical devices. He had made a fortune exploiting his own devices. He was a man of tremendous vision, and he immediately recognized the vast possibilities commercially and geographically, of Tesla's alternating current system. Shortly thereafter, he contacted Tesla for an interview. In a matter of minutes, Westinghouse agreed to pay Tesla $1 million outright for the alternating current patents, plus a royalty of $1 per horsepower. In a few moments required to negotiate the deal, a friendship was formed between the two men which, in its magnificence and trust, was of transcendent beauty. As things worked out, the friendship was almost the only happy development that resulted from the meeting. But as the years passed, Tesla never betrayed the slightest bitterness or regret over misfortunes that came to both men as a result of their cooperation. Tesla spent a weary, useless year in Pittsburgh attempting to get Westinghouse launched in his manufacturing efforts, but finally refused to stay longer. This is a picture of an AC motor that Tesla brought to Pittsburgh from New York City. It's in the, this is actually a picture from the Westinghouse Museum. They don't have the motor themselves. They gave them away years ago. The Westinghouse engineers, accustomed to their own way of doing things, were baffled and confused by Tesla's magic. Tesla, in turn, had no way of communicating with the men, since he could not get down to their level of understanding. To expect Tesla to go into a manufacturing plant and teach a group of American engineers at all stages of evolutionary development was, of course, ridiculous. At any rate, after his departure from the Pittsburgh plant, the Westinghouse engineers worked out their own problems, and the manufacturing process got underway. And right here is a picture of the Westinghouse plant that he worked at, which was located on an old Garrison Alley downtown on the site of the current David Lawrence Convention Center, where the Greyhound bus station is the old Fort Pitt Hotel where Tesla stayed.
Tesla at the top. After a bitter struggle, he's now the king of inventors. On hard for recognition, he takes pictures with a new light. And it's now generally agreed among many electrical men that Nikola Tesla is the greatest electrical inventor of this age. In all his works, he has conclusively shown himself to be far ahead of anyone else in originality of thought, in his conception of the wonderful possibilities of electricity, and in their developments. More than 10 years ago, even before he was working in Pittsburgh, he could find few people who believed in him, and many looked upon his schemes and plans as grand and wonderful imaginations of a theorist, but whose idea would never stand the test of practicality. Nevertheless, Mr. Tesla was not discouraged. When the gigantic power of the Falls of Niagara began to operate his large generators, ready to generate electrical energy at 5,000 horsepower, it was a great triumph of Tesla. Everyone now has come to the conclusion that Mr. Tesla was correct on these matters, and those who were once pronounced skeptics are now his staunchest admirers and believers. Startled London scientists. It was long before the triumph at Niagara, however, that Tesla astounded the whole civilized world in another direction. And that was in 1892, when as a comparative youth, he appeared before the Institute of Electrical Engineers of London, England, and showed to some of the most renowned men in electrical science experiments and phenomena which they had never dreamed of. Millions of volts pouring through his body. He glowed like an angelic being, and lit glass tubes that he was holding. He showed examples of new forms of lightning called fluorescence, neon, etc., all of his own making. Mr. Tesla repeated that lecture before all the learned societies of Europe, and was the guest of many a crowned head who showered honors upon his head. Since then, the name of this great electrical inventor has become familiar throughout the world, and he is considered the greatest electrical genius of the age. These wonderful triumphs of the young electrician are always gloried by the people of Pittsburgh, because it was here he practically commenced to develop the wonders which had startled the world of late years. The Pittsburgh Dispatch, 31 May, 1896.
This is a picture of the old Brinton Westinghouse plant. Brinton is now East Pittsburgh. And there's a gigantic horsepower motor Tesla helped design and put in there. There's George Westinghouse, part of the George Westinghouse Museum. Quite a visionary. Electrical force without wires. Nikola Tesla talks of his wonderful discoveries in transmitting energy. The inventor's queer mind expects to send force and intelligence around the world without cable. Here we see a picture of Tesla at the entrance of his workshop at the old Westinghouse plant downtown. This is from the Pittsburgh Dispatch. Tesla would return to Pittsburgh for brief periods of time in later years, mainly among the Serbian community, or brief dispatches with the Westinghouse people, but his role, he spent the rest of his twilight years in New York City. So he left here in a huff and returned to New York City into his own laboratory, to his beloved research, a wealthy man freed from the need for commercialism. This freedom was for him the greatest triumph that might come to a human soul. Working again on research for his polyphase power system, he was granted 45 more patents in this country during the next 5 years, in addition to more than 100 in foreign countries. Westinghouse was able, through the sheer power and superiority of the Tesla patents, to harness the Niagara Falls in order to light, for the first time, all of Buffalo and New York City on an unprecedented and unlimited scope through alternating current, as opposed to Edison's woeful direct current. Tesla personally supervised the construction of the huge alternating current generators at the site of the first power station at Niagara, on a place known still as Goat Island. There now stands a huge, magnificent bronze statue to his continued glory. Tesla then began his firestorm tour of Europe, where he became the electrical version of a rock superstar. All of his concerts were sold out, and even groupies of a sort formed. He returned triumphantly to New York again as an electrical Caesar. Tesla at this time received what he considered his greatest honor, an American citizenship. This he was displayed proudly for the rest of his life, and was found prominent among his personal effects upon his death. Speaking of death, he had visited his dying mother while in Europe and buried her. This would not be the only death that overshadowed his current glory. It was at this time that New York State prison authorities stepped openly into the magic field of electricity at Edison's urgings and turned it into a field of black magic overnight. They adopted alternating current as developed by Tesla for the electrocution of condemned prisoners. Edison himself had been traveling the countryside, putting the fear of AC into people's hearts by using it to electrocute dogs, cats, and cows. Edison would then state that these poor creatures had been Westinghoused. Tesla publicly claimed that the Edison interests had engineered the project to discredit him. For the Edison interests, this was not originally their purpose. Always anxious to make a dollar even one jump ahead of the undertaker, they had tried to provide direct current to power the electrical chair themselves. But they failed because of the plain fact that DC could not be produced at high voltages required. All of this was lost on the public, however. Tesla set out to beat these electrical Nazis back at his laboratory by making his earlier invention obsolete, and by placing the entire world on one simple electrical system which would enable all of God's children, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, whether black or white, redneck or freak, from Memphis to Moscow, to have light, more abundant light and living advantages. A world wireless electric system. The germ of this was already developing in his laboratory. Shortly before the hookup of Niagara to alternating current, George Westinghouse had won the right to light the Chicago World's Fair, and Tesla was in charge of the installation of the system. As usual, this coupled with Tesla's showmanship won the day for alternating current. Even at this time, Tesla was concentrating on his ultimate goal of wireless power. He did not endear himself to industrialists and investors when he would stand at dinners and pronounce to the world that he was developing a system of wireless power that would make his new alternating current obsolete. This was, of course, before those businessmen had even begun to see a dime of profit off his current system in which they had just invested. The germ of this wireless system was already developing in his laboratory. He was gaining fame for extensive pioneering in X-rays, cathode rays, cryogenic cooling of electrical apparatus for superconducting, radio, and a myriad of other mind-bending, cutting-edge technologies. At Madison Square Garden, he put a boat equipped with radio in a huge tank of water. From afar, he started, steered, and lighted the vessel by radio. He would later take a large version out into New York Harbor and demonstrate the remote-controlled firing of missiles to the Navy men's astonishment. It was too far beyond them in this day of 1898, and they turned it down. Tesla claimed it was the first of a race of robots that would fight operated from remote control in the future wars of the world. Whomever robots lasted longer, won. No human troop casualties, and this was before the age of the car.
Mr. Tesla as Bug Killer! It will be remembered that not long ago, Mr. Tesla suggested that part of the energy of powers like that of Niagara might be applied to furnishing nitrogen elements to the soil so that better crops could be secured. The question was then asked if electricity could not be used in a general way to kill off the bugs that are such a pest in orchard and field. Mr. Tesla, with wanted courtesy, admitted the importance of the subject and responded, and I quote, "It is sure that we can destroy these detrimental insects to certain ways by the help of electricity, and it could be settled by a series of experiments. I have some ideas on the subject and think that an apparatus could be built in a short time," unquote. I am resolved to think over the matter in the hope to arrive at the same tangible result. We have no doubt that to some people the idea of a notable inventor devoting his time to devising bug traps and sure deaths smacks for the grotesque and ridiculous. But in reality, Mr. Tesla could not undertake anything of more real and practical value. When one stops to consider how famine, ruin, and devastation afflict the human race because of such pests, it is evident there is work of real value to be done of vital importance to a great many people. The Electrical Engineer, 10 February, 1897.
Insects virtually see through their antennae as well as their eyes by means of picking up frequencies in the air. Tesla's solution was again simple and brilliant. Tune your equipment to the frequencies of the specific pest to be removed and let loose the energy. This would cause the overheating and death of that specific pest. Other more human-directed applications will be covered presently. Tesla would host parties at his laboratory which many thought to beat every other form of entertainment in town. To stand on his electrified platform and glow was a once-in-a-lifetime privilege. It was Tesla's suspicion that human cells function as condensers, capable of absorbing limitless amounts of energy. You see, it is not high voltage that kills, but high amperage. Tesla would increase the voltage to millions, decrease the amperage to minimal, and he would stand unaffected as metal rods would melt in his gloved hands and bulbs would light. There's a little story about Mark Twain visiting his lab one night and seeing this platform wanting to get on and glow also. And Tesla tried to stop him saying, "I think you just ate." And Mark Twain didn't want to hear it. He jumped on board, started glowing, and suddenly had a bowel movement. To his embarrassment, this was because the frequencies going through your body would energize every tissue and cell, including the bowel. So you have to be careful. When Tesla says, "Listen." This right here is Tesla's way to tame animals with electricity, with alternating current, of course, not direct current. You can tame lions, and they actually put this into use. There's some people today making fun, there's the press making fun of Tesla's theory, showing that, of course, there's the incandescent human lamp, people glowing, and people listening for the first message through the earth that goes on. They had their fun with him. He was an easy target. Tesla developed a wireless lighting system in his lab. He had a high-energy loop attached to the ceiling of his warehouse, and lights could be picked up and placed in any position anywhere in his lab, and there would be light. His lights were free from wires and connections and wall sockets. So the inventor for many years enjoyed the free fruits of his inventions, while the public has paid and paid and paid the pipers, whoever piped for more money profits for their outmoded utilities and merchandise.
A paper read by Mr. Nikola Tesla at a meeting of the Electrotherapeutic Association not long ago suggested a method of killing disease germs in the human body by means of a high voltage static electricity. In a word, Mr. Tesla's idea is to apply a current of several million volts to the surface of the body and by oxidizing the tissue, kill all the bacteria present. Mr. Tesla said that, quote, applying this to his own person for a fair number of years daily, and it is evident that he has suffered no illness in that time. As a matter of observance, he seems to be growing younger. Is such results as this patient and earnest experimentalist in the field of science has accomplished lie so far without the range of usual experiences that no comparison of any other results with them is even possible. They stand apart, and it must be left to the future to judge the value of their accomplishment. Electricity Magazine, 18 January 1899.
Tesla was the first to see that light, that radio and light are sound. They actually are just a different form of sound. And years later, of course they call him a crank at the time, years later he was, of course, once again vindicated. This is Tesla. Oh, there's 2 slides together. Anyhow, but this is Tesla in his laboratory. And there's pictures you can barely see here, but you can see them. He is pouring millions of volts through his body in the left-hand bottom corner to light this glass fluorescent tubing that he had made, and it was circular in nature. And on the right-hand side bottom, there's millions of volts pouring out, sparking from his arm. He's holding his arm out like this, and sparks are just flying off into space, millions of volts, long tendrils of it. This is Tesla's experiments being done in Berlin during the height of his fame when he was being received by the crowned heads of Europe. He was, like I said, the celebrity of his age, and he's disappeared since. This is Tesla on the cover of Time magazine. But another storm was brewing on the horizon for Tesla. A number of quick mergers with small companies happened, and a new unit was formed known as the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company. For Westinghouse had spent too much in trying to secure a foothold for alternating current in the country. Before the deal was finalized, the financial group put George Westinghouse on the spot and told him that he was to destroy his contract with Tesla. The alternative? The money men would destroy the Westinghouse organization as it existed, with Tesla at their mercy, and they had none. The money men were adamant in their determination not to share profits with anyone, not even the goose Tesla who had laid the golden egg. The financial group were set to see the company destroyed rather than yield a single dollar in horsepower royalty to Tesla. Westinghouse firmly grasped justice by the horn and went directly to Tesla and laid the fate of their enterprise at the inventor's feet. Westinghouse would, if Tesla so wished, defy the money men and honor Tesla's contract. With no Westinghouse, there was no Tesla, nor alternating current. It was a seeming defeat for Westinghouse. But Tesla quickly turned inescapable defeat into a spiritual triumph that will ring down the centuries as a cosmic moment in which 2 men touched divinity. Standing there before Westinghouse, Tesla serenely tore the contract to pieces. At that moment, he was entitled to at least $12 million in royalties, but he scrapped it without bitterness. He had saved the Westinghouse organization, it would give Tesla's invention to the world. The bankers could satisfy their money lust. After the financial setback engineered by the money men, Tesla never again had sufficient funds to develop his other inventions. Often his co-workers begged him to develop some small aspect of his inventions in order to support his greater discoveries. But Tesla refused to spend time on what he termed small stuff. He had no desire to benefit a few money men. He desired to benefit all of humanity itself. When Tesla was 80 years old, he was asked to give a speech before an immigrant association that wished to present him with an honor. Tesla wrote out a speech which was read at the dinner because he did not feel equal to attending in person. On the occasion of a dinner to honor him, he instead paid tribute to the deceased Westinghouse in a magnificent testimonial.
George Westinghouse was, in my opinion, the only man on this globe who could take my alternating current system under the circumstances then existing and win the battle against prejudice and money power. He was a pioneer, imposing stature, one of the world's true noblemen of whom America may well be proud, and to whom humanity owes an immense debt of gratitude.
Inventor Tesla's loss by a fire which occurred at 33 and 35 South Fifth Avenue on the morning of March 13, 1895. Nikola Tesla, inventor and scientist, sustained a severe loss in the total destruction of his laboratory, in which several nearly completed new inventions were, it is said, intended to revolutionize science. The loss cannot, unfortunately, be reckoned in dollars, and it is feared may seriously affect Mr. Tesla's health, as for some time he has been in a state of nervous exhaustion on account of overwork, occasioned by the approach to completion of some of his great inventions. Scientific American, 23 March, 1895.
Some of those lost revolutionary discoveries and inventions covered the following. He found that high-frequency periodic currents induced a narcotic influence on the body, causing sleep, a cure for insomnia. He was also floating 2-inch disc-shaped variants of the two-plated condenser around his lab. They were charged with high frequencies and had lost their weight. These were to develop into the infamous Tesla sphere, which we are all familiar with today, kind of known as the UFO. More on that later, though. The last was his famous Tesla coil. It was a unique process for generating extremely high voltages. You probably have an average of 15 of these Tesla coils in each of your households. So much do we depend on this. There was also his invention of the cool process, the electron tube.
I am in too much grief to talk. What can I say? The work of half of my lifetime, very sadly. All of my scientific instruments and scientific apparatus that it has taken me years to perfect, swept away in a fire that lasted only an hour or two. How can I begin to estimate the damage in mere dollars and cents? Everything is gone. I must begin over again.
This loss set Tesla back another 2 years in his researches. This gave time for competitors to catch up and to, in some cases, surpass him. Marconi took advantage of this in the radio arena. However, the circumstances surrounding the fire became more suspicious.
The destruction of Mr. Tesla's laboratory by a fire due to the carelessness of a lazy and stupid watchman is a very serious loss to the inventor and to the world. But it takes more than a fire to set back an inventor of such dauntless courage and such indefatigable originality. The electrical engineer, 20 March, 1895.
The watchman was later found to be in the employment of Edison, whose laboratories neighbored those of Tesla's. It seems that the war of the currents between AC and DC was not yet finished. At any rate, it was time for Tesla to set his sights towards different mountains to conquer, the Rocky Mountains. This is a picture of his laboratory that he built out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, with a 200-foot tall tower pole which lightning bolts issued forth from. During the summer of 1899, Dr. Tesla, who had already been awarded several honorary degrees from Yale, the Sorbonne, and other universities, ended up being like 19 in all, managed to construct and subsequently test one of the most incredible devices mankind has yet to see. Tesla had chosen Colorado Springs, Colorado for the Rocky Mountains' frequent supply of highly charged thunderstorms. Tesla's laboratory and experiments were located at a spot fairly close to the present-day Air Force Academy, what is called the Garden of the Gods, coincidentally. It was Tesla's idea to tap into these charged clouds from the ground using a tuning circuit. He had already determined that the lightning flashes from these storms seemed to discharge along a specific stationary wave pattern that he theorized encircled the globe. He built a gigantic Tesla coil called a magnifying transmitter, which used the Earth's surface as one plate of a spherical capacitor to the former. He linked them with a dielectric medium, the atmosphere itself. To overcome the problem of distance between the Earth and the ionosphere, which ranges from 25 miles to 250 miles, Tesla had aimed one end of a secondary coil of his gigantic Tesla coil at the ionosphere. The idea being that the charge crowding effect at the ball-capped tip of the 200-foot tall pole above the secondary would raise the effective voltage between the Earth and the ionosphere. This would have the same effect as bringing his laboratory and the ionosphere closer together. Concerning his successful test of July 3rd, 1899, Tesla said,
I first obtained the first piece of experimental evidence of a truth for the overwhelming advance of humanity. A dense mass of strongly charged clouds had gathered in the west over Pike's Peak, and toward evening a violent storm broke loose over the plains. Heavy and long persistent arcs of lightning flashes formed almost in a regular time intervals. No doubt whatever, we were observing stationary waves. The tremendous significance of this fact in the transmission of energy by my system had become quite clear to me. As the sources of the disturbances, the electrical thunderstorm moved away, discharges came successfully on their nodes and loops. Impossible as it might seem, this planet, despite its vast extent, behaved like a conductor of limited dimensions.
Tesla had discovered a process which could transmit almost unlimited amounts of electrical energy to any place on Earth with negligible losses. He had managed to estimate the resonant frequency of the Earth to ionosphere cavity at 150 kilocycles. It was a good guess, but one which has later proved to not be as sufficient as possible because the cavity resonance changes from moment to moment, depending on solar wind and sunspot activity. Well, just a brief thing of what he did here at Colorado Springs with the laboratory. He was located at this part of the globe here in Colorado. What he did, he started thumping the Earth with electrical thumps, basically. He was tapping the Earth, and what happened is it would create a splash effect, much as would on a pond if you threw a rock into it, and you see the waves go up. However, with the Earth, it spreads out in a smoke ring-like fashion, circles all the way over to 180 degrees opposite. This is called the pode, and this is the antipode. What happened? And the antipode was right around here somewhere. And then it would hit and reflect back. Now what he would do then is as the ring was coming back, he would time it in such a way that he would send out another pulse, just as that one was banging and going back, the original one. And he'd keep building and building and building the potentials. Now what happens is in physics, is you get a cooling effect at the sending tower, and you get a superheating effect down in the receiving end. And his idea was that you better have something at the receiving end to draw off all that heat and energy, or else you might have an explosion. And he in 1904 wrote a paper where he feared, it was called "If the Air Should Burn Up," in which he feared that his process would cause the air to ignite and the oxygen to burn worldwide, and of course we'd all be dead. And so he had to be careful with what he was doing at this, but he was the Superman. He handled it because we're all here. Like as Dr. Tesla once observed, the Earth is like a gigantic spinning ball of the electric fluid of space. His observation would imply that an electromagnetic thump on one part of the ball, electric fluid, would send splash rings spiraling around the planet, only to meet at the antipode of the initial thump. There, quite contrary to one's first thought, these splash rings would not simply reflect from meeting themselves at the antipodes, simply to eventually return to the source point. Not so. For they would indeed meet at the antipodes, the opposite 180 degrees, the opposite side of the Earth, but the vector sums of their meetings would not be head-on, as the density of the transmitting medium is not compressible. And this is some high physics here, and I'm We were expecting some people tonight, so I'm going to talk to you guys for a second. Instead of colliding, the wavefronts would actually produce a return wavefront, which would then spiral back to the source like a spinning smoke ring, or toroidal energy. This redirected wavefront would only partially interact with the next oncoming wave from the source. This would be due to the fact that both wavefronts would be separated by an angle somewhere between 90 and 180 degrees, depending upon the relative motion of the planet's conductive surface, in contrast to the planet's spinning magnetic field. That angle between the send and return waves could also be controlled at the source by enhancing or retarding the wave's pulse's spin moment. If one were to then observe the path of the energy pulses, one would perceive an immense global grid system which would be broadcasting power around the entire world. The grid illusion would be caused by the energy density spirals from the initial wave being overlapped by the energy density spirals of the return wave. All you would need at this point to run anything from wireless power anywhere in the world is to have a certain antenna connected to it, and it's tuned to that frequency, and that frequency only. And this wouldn't cause, as you hear now, this cancer and stuff, because it wouldn't be to the frequency of your body. It would be to the specific frequencies to these antennas. You could then run anything, cars, anything. This was his original scheme. To tap the energy of such a broadcast requires the construction of a tunable Tesla coil, which operates at about 14.3 kilohertz, or some even superharmonic of it. Of course, the higher the harmonic the coil is tuned to, the lower will be the power received in an inverse proportion to the increased frequency. The Tesla coil's primary would be the high voltage inner coil in this instance, as the voltage will need to be stepped down. One night, Tesla resonated the entire Earth with over 100 million volts. He dressed in a tuxedo, gloves, spats, and top hat, stood at a distance to watch the spectacle. He gave the order, and his men threw the switches. The account that follows goes something like this.
Quote, "The gigantic luminous threads filled the atmosphere with ozone. It seemed that the artificial lightning bolts reached a length of 300 feet, for a shed 300 feet away from the lab was set afire. In the meantime, flames shot out from nearby water towers. Hundreds of people rushed out of their dwellings, and when touching their plumbing in their houses, they drew large sparks. Horses whinnied and jumped in pain as large sparks shot through their hooves to the distant fields. The thundering could be heard 100 miles away and drowned out the shouts of fear and misery. Many an inhabitant of Colorado Springs thought that the world was coming to an end. It was all of 3 in the morning. A preacher gathered the crowd around him, and quoting from Psalm 31, he made them repeat,
'Deliver me in thy righteousness. Bow down thine ear to me. Be thou my strong rock, for an house of defense to save me. For thou art my rock and fortress.'"
The great experiment that required months of preparation at an enormous expense was over in 20 minutes. For Tesla had also invented something else, the first power blackout. He had destroyed the plant supplying Colorado Springs with his alternating current, so high were the potentials he was using it.
Tesla gathers electricity from the globe, makes it discharge at Colorado Springs. Awesome spectacle at Colorado. Austrian-American inventor at work. Artificial lightning terrifies populace. Tesla's experiment, great success. Electricity that circles the Earth 7 times in 1 second created a pool at Colorado Springs. The first wave sent by the great electrician hit an opposite side of the Earth. It rebounded in a fraction of a second to Tesla's experimental station, carrying with it new charges. In this manner, he created a great reservoir of electrical energy in 2 minutes. He drained electricity along a path from halfway between Australia and the island of Mauritius to his reservoir at Colorado Springs. Ships at sea equipped with dynamos passing that area in the Indian Ocean had their lights extinguished. The sharp current went to Tesla. St. Louis Dispatch, July 1999. Oops, he wasn't that far ahead of his time. July 1899. Thank you very much.
I think some of us will disagree. He was even further in. But thank you very much, Mr. Reporter. Tesla came back to New York City in 1900 in triumph. This is a picture of the Garden of the Gods. It's just poetic. Tesla was there doing his godlike activity. That's the Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs, Colorado. He had proved his old dream of wireless power transmission beyond a doubt. Two other things he had done was to talk to Mars on several occasions while in Colorado.
The inhabitants of Mars, for example, must have intelligence. Their life must be made up of events. They must have a conception of time, and therefore they must have a means of measuring time, of recording events. Without that, they could have no history. Thus, upon a mathematical basis, I believe a system could be developed into an intelligible code, capable of conveying the most intricate communications. There is no limit to possibilities of its development. It is upon the result of that calculation that I base the declaration of my belief that a serious attempt at transfer of intelligence to Mars will be made within a short time.
It actually wasn't that unusual. Most people in that time believed because of the canals that were seen on Mars. I mean, some very prominent scientists believed there was life there. And Tesla, it wasn't so much that he communicated by voice, but that he was tapping out messages to them. He'd heard something that didn't come from the Earth, didn't come from the Sun, and it seemed to come from the location where Mars was located. And this is what he based his belief upon. The other was that he had used electricity to create fogs so dense that he could not see his hand before his face, and precipitated thunderstorms. He had thusly invented weather control.
Mr. Nikola Tesla requests us to state that his office and laboratory have been removed to Warden Cliff, Long Island, New Jersey, and that all correspondence should be addressed there. Electricity Magazine, 1900.
Tesla goes into a little more detail. I might want to have a second to read that. Okay. Radio waves heard from Jupiter and Venus. He actually was right. He heard something. It wasn't intelligent in a way, but it was actually communication in a way from the planets themselves to him. So he was right. Just not the intelligent beings part. This, once again, is a picture of how he intended to do his wireless transmission around the world. It says Tesla's worldwide wireless transmission of electrical signals, as well as light and power, is here demonstrated in theory, analogy, and realization. Tesla's experiments with 100-foot discharges at potentials of millions of volts have demonstrated that the Hertz waves are infinitesimal, in effect, and unrecoverable. The recoverable ground waves of Tesla fly through the Earth. Goes on, engineers are gradually beginning to see the light, that the laws of propagation laid down by Tesla over a quarter of a century ago goes on to form the true basis of all wireless transmission today. Just the actual power part gets a little tricky. He built on the Warden Cliff site. He built on the Warden Cliff site a world power broadcasting station. Focus here. That stood over 250 feet tall and looked like a Martian war machine from War of the Worlds. Here he was to continue his experiments, which he had started in Colorado, and here he was to continue terrifying the local populace, again, with lightning discharges from the tower, in excess of 500 feet. He was to continue receiving messages from Mars, and as soon as the money men found out, along with the government, that he meant to supply free power to all inhabitants of planet Earth, they made mighty steps to stop him. They cut off his funding. They used their press and media assets to ridicule him in the press. He, in turn, turned more inward, his behavior becoming more bizarre. One night in 1908, he sent a final power blast out from his facility that even had the press noticing and commenting, and then it was over. He abandoned the facility, giving it to his creditors. Abandoning it to his creditors. A few years later, the government blew it apart to erase its memory, just as was done with the local steel mills here in Pittsburgh. It says they're not built to be just a landmark. And you can't reuse something that ain't there. That's why they destroyed it. Worse, Marconi was now being lionized in the press for inventing radio, and Tesla was ignored calculatingly. There it is where they destroyed it. It took days of blasting dynamite, so solidly did Tesla build this thing. It took days of dynamiting it before it finally fell. Well, they claimed there was German spies trying to use this thing, but we all know it was for some of his free energy experiments. And it was actually only the sensationalizers. That's a picture of his power station as it would have been in operation. Over here you see his kind of, what's actually not a Tesla sphere, it's a Tesla cigar. But it's up in the right-hand corner. It's floating along without any fuel on board. It's being broadcast energy to it as it's floating along, and it's charged with high frequencies, therefore it's lifting. And this was just the whole conception of what he thought he could do. It may not be reality, but that's what it looked like in his mind. During the ensuing decades, like I said, he continued to invent that had no funds in which to realize it. Though he gave annual interviews. Concerning Marconi's success, Tesla once sniffed, "Let him go ahead. He is using 18 of my patents in his radio." He also once opined that Marconi was a donkey. We got some stuff here. This is a picture of Tesla and Marconi. Marconi at the bottom, Tesla on the right corner. Tesla's great achievements. Here we go. Tesla theorized because the Hindenburg disaster during the war, too, he also, World War I, he theorized the Hindenburg disaster may have been done by wireless, sending wireless to them, and he said he had knowledge it could be done because he had done it. Court excuses Tesla. Tesla did not believe, even though, especially with the incident that happened at the prison of New York City, he did not believe in capital punishment. I thought it was inhuman and barbaric. So the court excused him many times when they went to summon him, and they would excuse him. He was a total pacifist. He developed supposedly diabolical rays, which is what we now know later he invented pretty much what they're going to implement in the Star Wars system. It's particle beam weaponry, and he had talked about particles flying at fast speed along a slight little thin line trajectory. And he puts range at 8 miles. They can paralyze an army and fleet, roll the air. Here he goes. In the 1920s, his radio lightning power was perfected. There it goes in operation. There's his power broadcasting to happy little planes and ships and factories, and no pollution. Tesla 79 promises to transmit force. It would even guide ships. He wants to send it all over energy all over the world, but he assails the theory of relativity as a work of metaphysician and not scientific. Now, he did have some, he wasn't that, he was a little wrong in several areas. One was with atomic energy. He didn't believe that the way they were going to do it would happen. He said he had pumped millions of atoms through his devices at speeds, he said, in excess of what the Einsteinian theory said that atoms or any of these particles would move. He said he did it faster than the speed of light because it circled the Earth too many times fast to have been less than the speed of light. But he was wrong about the atomic energy. When they blew up the first bomb, he wasn't around though. He had died before then. He didn't get to see that he was wrong on that. But we know there are some parts of the theory of relativity that even Einstein himself, right before he died in a biography, he admitted there were some faults with it, but that through serendipity, these would be overcome, especially with the theories of gravitation. Tesla promises big things, a planeless, screwless airship safe in any storm. When he goes on to describe is what most people would think of as a UFO. Okay, it has no energy in itself. It's broadcast from power stations, and it goes thousands of miles per hour through the air. Very fast, the aerodynamics, he goes into the whole thing, and everything he says sounds like a UFO. And he claims he gave all these things, he said at the end of every interview, he's saying, I have given this to the government for their use because I love America and I'm a citizen, I want to see America succeed. And the government would always shut up, no comment. When woman is boss, he felt that through technology, that women, the equating factors involved with technology, because you're dealing with a lot of labor-saving devices, that women would naturally become the new rulers, the new order, power order, because he said that their brains had been kept dormant for so long, or just kept, that there was such a potential that had been built there, that when it finally sprung forward, they would just totally lambast men left and right. That just be the end of the old patriarchy. So he was, none of the feminists had it. He was with the suffragettes at the time. He believed in them. He also, in this article, goes into a lot of his other inventions, which of course he didn't have the money. Sea power plant designed by Tesla using geothermal energy, which is, once again, he was ahead of his time. The first one to conceptualize that. There he is giving a speech. No, he's giving a talk to reporters of Newsweek. They used to come in every anniversary, every birthday anniversary, they'd come and listen to whatever new bizarre things he had to say, what kind of new terror weapons he was going to produce from his bedroom, I guess, because he didn't have, like I said, they'd taken everything away from him. And he says here he's going to produce a ray to produce death and destruction. Tesla maps our electrical future. They used to come to him. He still was useful for some things. He predicted television and predicted it accurately as to how it would be, and he even developed some of the primary, basic, simple, early components of it. Baby electric planes, cosmic rays, goes on and on. He and Edison both got the Nobel Prize in 1915. How many knew that? He turned it down. Why was that? He wouldn't appear on the stage with Edison. Can you blame the guy? Electrocuting animals, household pets, poor little cats and dogs. I wouldn't either. What did he win it for? Here we go. It's transmission of electrical energy without wires. What I've been saying all along. He to illuminate the ocean was one of the applications that they granted the Nobel Prize. His theory was to electrically charge the ocean, excite the atoms, it would glow, and make, in his idea, ocean transportation that much safer. Maybe you can see each other. You don't need headlights now, you have the ocean. He also was going to illuminate the ionosphere. And he talked about this once again with his experiments in Colorado Springs, and but once again he was afraid the air might burn up. But in 1908 he did do a serious blast of energy there, 500-foot long things. And I'll talk about that in a second, what the result of that might have been. But to illuminate the oceans with his wireless energy is why he got the prize, but he turned it down. Edison didn't get it either. If one turns it down, the other one didn't get it. So he got his revenge on Edison. Here is Colonel Astor, the famous Astor family in New York City. He was a victim of the Titanic. He was on board. And when they went to look through his personal effects, they found a few $1,000s worth of stock. I think it was $30,000 to $50,000 worth of stock in the Tesla Electric Company. And he was like a behind-the-scenes investor. Well, wireless transmission of power now possible. And this is the electrical experimenter, which was a magazine run by Hugo Gernsback. If anybody's ever heard the Hugo Award, it was named after Mr. Hugo Gernsback. And he was a solid supporter of Mr. Tesla and kept his name. He was a quasi-respectable man, or sometimes got a little outrageous. But he kept Tesla's in the public eye as much as he could, which wasn't that much. And so he was a proponent of Tesla's. Here we go. Intercontinental ballistic missiles. Anybody familiar with them? Well, this is a 1919 illustration of Tesla's concept of that. And it's flying along, it's blasting along over the enemy lines, as you can see, smoke and everything, and it's going to go to its target thousands of miles away and land within feet. The only thing was it didn't have a computer on board. It was all being broadcast by radio, just like his floating devices on the water, the submarines. And once again, it had no energy on it. It was beamed the energy, and the energy would convert inside of some plasma engine and then boost it out the back. At 78, once again, new death beam, defensive weapon only. Another big headline for him. There he is. This is his death. Of course, he had to die. He had claimed he could live to about 150 years of age, and he said it was going to be with the help of alcohol. And because of his stimulating baths. He said, I take a bath twice a day, once in water, once in electricity. But at 87, he died, and we think it was because of a broken heart. He didn't die of anything that was really, the autopsy didn't show anything significant except natural death. So that's a picture of him. They honored him. That's probably Time or News. No, it's Radio Crap. Radio Crap was actually a real solid, they stuck to science a lot in that paper. Here we go. Tesla's new device, like Bolts of Thor. Shadow Army also. This is where he said he could send power anywhere on Earth, and it would electrocute the armies where they stood. They wouldn't see the enemy coming, the weapon coming, it would electrocute them. And he said he could do it through geometry, the geometry of involved with the physics of the electrical part of the Earth. There he is, he dies. They gave him a claim to death beam. And they honored him. Every paper pretty much gave an article to him. Hugo Gernsback wanted a death mask, and he got it. There it is. Anyhow, right before Tesla died, he once stated that the great love of his life wasn't Anna Morgan, wasn't any of these other, wasn't even the press, which he loved to the court. It was a pigeon. He used to go around, and in his later years, he would take care of pigeons. He would feed them on the New York City library steps, and people would see him there. They wouldn't even realize this was Tesla, the man who lit up their entire city and cities worldwide. This was the great man sitting there feeding pigeons. And he would take them home and fix them and mend them, and his hotel apartment was full of pigeon and pigeon other things, as you know. And the cleaning ladies were very unhappy with Mr. Tesla. But he once stated that the love of his life was a pigeon. This is near the end of his death, which he refers to as the white dove.
I had taken care of her for years. And our females, she understood me only. It was on this night that I knew that my time on earth was not long. One night, as I sat in deep meditation in my hotel room, she flew in the open window. We had a long conversation, she and I, and she told me that she was going to die and not come to me again. Then she flew to the windowsill and stood there, gazing at me, sitting alone in the darkened room. Suddenly, from her eyes came great sweeping rays of light, like more intense than had been ever produced in my laboratories. Then, she was gone. I loved that dove. She was a white female with a touch of gray in her wings. I loved her as a man loves a woman.
At the end of his life, Tesla's greatest form of entertainment was to, during thunderstorms, pull up a sofa and sit to watch God's handiwork, often clapping, as if from one equal to another. One night in particular, his last night on Earth, an assistant of Tesla's was cleaning up the office while Tesla sat in the next room, viewing the thunderstorms. Suddenly he heard fierce screams and alarmed ran into the room where Tesla was. The wind and rain was pouring into the room, and Tesla could be seen standing defiantly, a fist raised against the storm and the lightning flashes, and he said,
I have created that the lightning get that.
Tesla suffered a slight stroke, but refused medical attention, saying, it's all right, it's all right. He didn't trust doctors. 2 days later, he was found dead in his room, penniless and alone, surrounded only by the pigeons that he loved. He was buried with full honors by the government. Thousands showed up. The government took possession of all his materials and devices. Most of his work is still in their possession and remains highly classified to this day. In 1943, 6 months after his death, the U.S. Supreme Court declared that it was Tesla and not Marconi who had invented radio. A little too late, but it matters. Tesla once uttered a statement about his life that makes a fitting epitaph.
Let the future tell the truth and evaluate each one according to his work and accomplishments. The present is theirs. The future, for which I really worked, is mine.
Thank you. If I may have the players out here again. The reporter, Mr. Rik Billok. Appeared in many movies, with George Romero, others. Great actor here. We also have Graff, ZIGETTI, and The Preacher. As Anna Morgan, Jennifer McMahon. And as the incomparable Mr. Nikola Tesla, John Henchar. Thank you guys very much. Really great. I actually was very cruel. I only gave him a week to prepare for this. That shows I picked them for that reason. They're really great. Really great. 2 weeks. What? 2 hours. Well, actually, they got the last part of their last 7 pages of the script was 2 hours before you guys showed up. So, really great. Just a few real quick slides here. Then I've got a couple questions, then because I guess time's running out here. This is a Pittsburgh connection, another Pittsburgh connection. A guy named Henchar, Lester J. Henchar, invented a motor. It's a fuelless motor, he claimed. It was just claims in the Pittsburgh papers. He claimed that he had read a lot of Tesla and was influenced by this. A lot of controversy during the time period. Colonel Lindbergh, Lucky Lindy, actually went and conferred on the thing and found that it worked. According to what these guys said, it worked. Conferring on no fuel motor based on Tesla's principles, it would run off the geomagnetism of the Earth. A lot of critics once said, well, shield the thing and we'll see if it still runs. Okay? And went on. Colonel Lindbergh helps to test the new motor, is said to use electromagnetism, no fuel. And he didn't deny it either. Major Lanphier from the Army backed the thing too. Tested it at Selfridge Air Force Base. There's Hendershot with his son. His son, a couple years later, he committed suicide. Hendershot committed suicide. He went to Washington, D.C., tested it before it's the people at the patent office, and he got electrocuted with the thing. And he was spent time in the hospital, but he was driven, once again, Tesla style, into anonymity and ridiculed and every other thing, and it was bought up, and he committed suicide. His son is still working on it. He's originally from Elizabeth, PA, which is down near Clarendon and McKeesport. Tesla came up with a plane to vertically take off and then go. What does that remind me of? The Harrier jet came out during the Falkland Wars. And here we go. Magic carpet jet unveiled. Takes off, lands vertically. New discovery. Don't think so. 1920s Tesla. Electrical theory of tornadoes. Tesla was right. Weather is electrical. You can control the electricity. You can control the weather. It just takes a lot of doing. Here we go. This is Reserve Township. This is Ampere Street. It's a place called Electrical Hill. Took a little visit out, took some pictures. And yeah, that's Mount Troy Road, Ampere Street. Ohm Street, you notice there's no outlet. You also notice that real bad pit bull sitting there? He was bad sound effects way so you could hear him. It was kind of a little scary. Took that at great risk behind the fence. Edison Street. Okay. Tesla Street. Or is it one? Looks more like a path, but yet.
There is a Tesla on Greenfield.
A real street. Greenfield?
Yep, right off Bigelow Street, right between Bigelow and Montclair.
Oh, I'll take a walk out there.
22 blocks long.
Well, this was the first one. Supposedly, it doesn't even have a sign, nothing. This is typical of just the treatment he has received. It's only a paper street, like a paper moon.
Where?
On Mount Troy, it's Mount Troy Hill. There's a Troy Hill and there's a Mount Troy Hill. There's a view you can actually see from Tesla Street. You can actually see downtown, but downtown can't see Tesla, which is typical. Some of the things, ion-propelled aircraft. This is from the Popular Mechanics, but you can't find it in the American version. It's only available in the Australian, and it shows how he could, using an ion wind. Once again, this guy, Major Dave Seversky, did a lot of our, he did the Mustang during World War II. Real smart guy. He invented a lot of airplanes for us, and then he did this, and it floats around and everything. So I don't know if little green men are involved with these UFOs, but I know human beings are. And it all goes back to Tesla. Towards flight without stress or strain or weight. This is Inter-Avium magazine, 1950s. And it shows Townsend T. Brown, a physicist, working with one of Tesla's two-plate condensers, or variant thereof, in which to once again fly around without stress or strain or weight. This is actually an Inter-Avius World Series publication. It was done, the author's name was Intel. You can't find out what his real name is, though. Intel, Intelligence. Secret is out on quakes. It's a spy plane a couple years ago. It's like 1993, I believe, Los Angeles Times. There was a craft that travels 4,000 miles per hour, which is what Tesla predicted. And it caused earthquakes, the resonant vibrations was another Tesla phenomenon, which he had predicted. Gravity nullified. It's actually backwards. It says gravity nullified. Now, right there are some German guys. This is from the 1920s. There's a quartz crystal there, that they're between two dielectric beams. They're floating the thing. It's being charged with high-frequency currents, millions and millions of volts. And it started to float. They thought, well, let's test a little bit more. You see, if you can see it, there's like a dumbbell at the bottom there attached to it. It's like a 10-pound weight. It's floating also. And these guys have read Tesla, were influenced by him. Conquest of Gravity, aim of top scientists in U.S., the Herald Tribune, New York, 1955. These come from outer space, right? You got little green men. People are getting abducted by them. Changes far beyond atom are the prize. Thousands of miles per hour. Once again, they can go without burning up. Some of the top industrialists were involved with this. Bell Helicopter, Gluharef, all these. Flying saucer age for U.S. is getting nearer. 1950s again. This is Newsweek. No, U.S. News and World Report. It goes into the role. New air dream. The second article, next day, new air dream. Planes flying outside gravity. Once again, goes into all the technical aspects on it, what they were doing. Mr. Bell. And here's Tesla's wireless power being brought to play. Propagation of extremely low frequency electromagnetic waves and Project Sanguine Seafarer. You see, I have a Tesla the Prophet. Tesla's concept of wireless telegraphy, and when submarines are underwater, if a nuclear war happens, how are they going to get information? Well, you can't do it through the air, so you have to do it through the water wirelessly. Well, they also found out they could broadcast power to them. There's these submarines in which they beam power to them. They trail these long antennae behind them, and it collects the power up in a Tesla fashion, gives it into the there's like a plasma reactor. It excites the reactor at the high temperatures. This is how these things can go for years without coming back to port unless there's some major structural damage. Guess who's fooling around with the weather? Tesla's weather control. The Pentagon, blah, 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 CIA, not to mention state and local governments, and even Coors beer is messing with your weather. You get a bad cloudy day, Coors. but I think more Tesla. Mysterious blast in New Zealand. This is from the 1970s. Mysterious explosion of terrific force shook the West Coast. Strange silver shape flashing overhead at the same time as reported. Traveling at high speeds. Tesla was often associated with the agreement to discuss weather warfare ban. In 1975, U.S. and USSR signed a pact outlawing 19 man-made weather catastrophes to include man-made hurricanes and cyclones that would be built up and then guided to cities and military installations, reversing of rivers, hail the size of cannonball, and it goes on and on and on. The Volkswagens actually, it goes on and on and on. Tidal waves you can create, alter electricity. This is the legacy of Tesla. It actually is a real thing. These guys did it at the UN. Weather warfare must be ruled out, a Soviet publication. The Soviets actually became very alarmed at it because the US's advances in it, which they knew of. This is from a Soviet publication that was published in the US. Bruno Pontecorvo, one of the nuclear traders, along with Klaus Fuchs, he went to Russia and he was working on these anti-gravity things. Okay, you can fly 1,000. Like Dawn at Midnight, there was an explosion in 1908, right around the time. Are you running out there? Okay, real quickly. Anybody heard of the Great Siberian Blast of 1908? Destroyed 1,000 square miles of tundra. Like Dawn at Midnight, Tesla once again said I could light up the ionosphere, make it daylight. It happened for a couple of days. It was daylight. People go out and play golf 3 in the morning around the world. And that's a picture. It's kind of like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now they try to say it was a meteorite, but they investigated. No meteorites. They're trying to rehash it now through discovery. It's an old lie. Actually an old lie. Once again, like I said, Tesla broadcasting power. If you look where Tesla's big tower was in Long Island, New Jersey, it's exactly, it's almost, it's a couple degrees shy of 180 degrees away from his tower in Long Island, New Jersey, the big Star Wars looking thing. Fireballs for defense. Tesla actually in his experiments in 1899 made fireballs from lightning, and they think it's a nuclear phenomenon. This is the Westinghouse Museum in Wilmerding. They were kind of presenting this as a little section of the museum to Tesla. Other inventors that have been ignored. There's a Granville T. Woods. It goes on in the article here. There's a young black inventor who invented the incandescent light bulb, and Edison took it off him and took all the credit for it. It wasn't Edison. So a lot of other people have been obscured. Disproportion now of immigrants and minorities, which Tesla was one. And finally, I'm doing a film on the bomber, the B-25. I'm attempting to do a film on the B-25 bomber that disappeared from Monterey back in 1956, and it's one of the things I'm doing to get there. So I think that's about it. Okay, thank you very much. Is there any questions that I can't answer? The HARP system. Chuck Harder, a lot of people have been putting this out. They're a little shaky, but they're actually talking about something true. It's a Tesla technology where you lift the ionosphere, and there's a cavity there. All the stuff which I explained, what he did in 1899, where you can lift the ionosphere up and then create this weather control and a couple other things. A lot of defense.
There's also an array up in Sweden that's much more stronger than an arbor array.
I think I've heard. I didn't know it was quite Sweden. I knew it was somewhere around. I heard something else. I didn't know it was Sweden.
Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's work.
Yeah, actually, Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain was based on his friendship with Tesla. That's actually Nikola Tesla you're reading about, where he goes back in time and teaches people electricity, and King Arthur's Court creates havoc.
Did Tesla do any work with teleportation and/or time travel?
Yes, he did. Near the end of his life, he made discoveries that the basic component in our universe isn't space, time, matter, it's energy. And he said if you can manipulate energy, then you can also manipulate space and time, which is energy. So he was actually working with some things in 43. That's really the Philadelphia experiment. Anybody heard of that? Well, his name's right there near Einstein's stuff on the legends when he was working there.
In the Tribune, Greensburg Tribune, your advertisement was that he was born in Croatia.
Actually,
He was born in Austro-Hungary. And his father was a Serbian Orthodox priest.
he was Tesla came down solidly and said, I'm a Serbian. A lot of people said, you're Croat. He said, no, I'm a Serbian.
Now, at the end of the line, when he refused money from Westinghouse to live his days on, he accepted it from the Yugoslav government.
Yes. The Yugoslav government did give
And
Tesla.
he willed 17 suitcases to the Yugoslav government, which was in war, automatically went to Russia.
Yeah, that's right. The Yugoslav government did remember Tesla. They gave him like $7,000 a year near the end of his life, but it was quickly dissipated. He spent a lot of it on. He was constantly in debt, though. But the Yugoslav government remembered Tesla, one of their own son. That is correct.
I think Mr. Westinghouse did give him a pension.
Tesla refused it, though. Like he said, Tesla refused it. He refused it.
The pension also. He
Yes.
received the money and the dollar.
He took the initial $200,000 that Westinghouse did slide to him. Said, I'm not going to give you $1 million because these guys don't want me to give you the money. They're going to screw you over, but I'll give you $200,000. Tesla quickly spent it.
Has the tunnel system at the Long Island site ever been successfully explained?
The Tesla
No,
wireless
there's
system.
a bunch of a system of tunnels by the Long Island.
You're talking about
site.
Montauk?
Pardon?
Montauk, New Jersey? Yeah, well, there's a Montauk facility. Actually, after Tesla did that, they actually went and he did build another facility secretly for the government, Montauk. And there's hundreds of miles of underground tunnels, which they wired. They filled a lot of them with cement, so you won't be able to go back and try to see it. But yeah, actually, Tesla was doing stuff. So in 1908, he was capable of creating that explosion in
Have
Siberia.
they been explained?
Huh? That's, you go near there. You go near there. There's signs, almost like Area 51, saying don't proceed further. Caution, you'll be shot in the head.
He neglected to mention that his tower that was dynamite was on the other tip of Long Island, I believe, about 15 miles from Montauk, north of there.
Yeah, it was almost not. Wasn't that far away.
Yeah, you didn't mention in your lecture where it was. People might. I have a question for you. Two questions. One, was Nikola Tesla aware of the 1908 event?
Yes.
Oh, really? And what did he
20
do?
years before, because it took 20 years for them to get there. It was a remote area.
And I would like your personal opinion of what that event was called.
Tesla. It was not a meteorite. They tried to say it was a meteorite. It was a black hole that punched through the earth. But that's so. Why didn't the black hole would go through the other side, punch out the other way, and create another explosion? They tried every other bizarre thing. It's just like this UFO thing. Oh, it's little green men, blah, 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 blah. Human beings could never create it. We just can't.
What is your
But-
opinion of what did cause it?
Well, it's like, once again, it said he was broadcasting from here. He created a super potential over here. And it got so hot, but there was nothing to drain the energy off. Like I said, the smoke ring effect where it kept building and building and building. You get a superheating here, a cooling over here, and then an explosion. It exploded.
You think that Tesla created this event in 1908?
Yeah. It was some people say it was a miscalculation that he was trying to impress Admiral Peary while he was going to the North Pole.
Well, the opposite point to Colorado Springs or anywhere in America is in the southern hemisphere, not the northern hemisphere.
That's
Right.
The opposite point to the United States, the entirety of the United States, the antipodes is in the southern
Yeah, see,
hemisphere.
Tesla said he could mathematically,
Not
through
northern
geometry, he could place the power anywhere he wanted to.
Okay.
He said it was just a matter of just putting something somewhere. It's just energy could be redirected through the geometry that's involved with the physics. That later. Not as concentrated. Very low frequencies. It's extremely, what they call extremely low frequencies. Tesla's motor worked on the same thing. Everything he did was very low frequencies. The Tesla motor went at 60 some cycles, and the Westinghouse people said we wanted it at 133. It's kind of like Bill Gates and all these computers. They're not compatible because you have to, in other words, you have to buy their system. But Westinghouse says, well, we're going to have alternating current. You can only use our system. It's kind of like the same thing, but it didn't work. Eventually, they had to go to Tesla and say, okay, you're right, it's 60.
Nikola was a great inventor, no question about that. I happen to be one of the few people in Pittsburgh that's received the Tesla Award in the Electrical Engineers Society. And
Oh, really?
uh,
The IEEE.
yeah,
Tesla work?
Well, my group and I made the generators for Niagara that are now up
The
there
new stations.
on the U.S. side. The machines that
Thanks for coming.
Allegheny, Kinzo, they operated 1/3 of a million horsepower.
Yeah, it's really incredible. But it's all still, it's still Tesla stuff. It hasn't changed in all
That's
these
right.
years. It's just bigger. It's a lot more horsepower. But
Well,
Tesla
one of
has
the
not been
machines
improved
at
upon
Niagara
that.
is about 300 times the capacity of the original one. A friend of mine's father was at 26, was the chief of the power system in Buffalo to receive the power from Niagara, one of the two stations. And he grew up in that and has had an important business in inventing many of the relays.
Yeah.
The clouds, well, fewer people realize that the Earth is sailing around the sun at 76,000 miles an hour. And so some of this other stuff is kind